The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from over 300 species filed in through the massive quantum crystal doors. You could practically smell the fear. Well, if you had a nose, that is. Ambassador Zix certainly didn't, but his sensory tendrils were picking up enough stress pheromones to give him a headache, if he had a head. Look, xenobiology is complicated, okay? Order in the chamber. High C.L. Varie's voice boomed through the cavernous space, her bioluminescent patches flashing an urgent shade of purple. The usual pompous ceremony was notably absent. No ceremonial entrance processions, no ritual greetings, not even the traditional 17-minute harmonic resonance meditation. When a governing body that once spent 3 solar cycles debating the proper protocol for sneezing in zero gravity skips the formalities, you know things are serious. Ambassador Zixi slithered toward the central podium, his chromatic scales shifting between anxious shades of green and grey. The assembled delegates fell into an uneasy silence. Well, mostly silence. Someone in the back was still stress-molting. "Esteemed colleagues," Zikra began, his universal translator working overtime to convey the gravity of his words in all 742 recognized languages of the Council. "We are gathered here today because, quite frankly, we messed up. And when I say messed up, I mean we made the kind of mistake that makes installing a quantum drive backwards look like a minor oversight." A nervous titter rippled through the chamber. The Igian representative, all 17 of their eyes wide with concern, raised an appendage. "Surely it cannot be as bad as the great miscalculation of cycle 47.0.392. Zix's scales flashed a deep crimson. "Oh, it's worse, much worse. Remember how we all thought humans were just those funny bipedal creatures who spent most of their time arguing about whether their frozen dairy proteins should be consumed with or without small carbon-based crystals on top? The ones who hadn't even figured out basic telepathic communication yet?" The chamber erupted in murmurs. A Flaxian diplomat in the third row actually began to liquefy from anxiety. "Well," Zikra continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room, "it turns out we may have slightly, catastrophically, underestimated them. And by we, I mean primarily the Kraken Empire. May their molecules rest in peace." The High Counselor's bioluminescence shifted to a concerned magenta. "Ambassador, please explain to those who weren't present during the incident." Zikra's scales rippled with what could only be described as the chromatic equivalent of a nervous laugh. "How much time do we have? Because this is the kind of story that makes the Great Void Wars look like a minor disagreement over parking spaces in the Horsehead Nebula." He gestured to the holographic display behind him, which flickered to life, showing the Earth system. "It all started when some brilliant mind in the Kraken Military Command thought it would be a splendid idea to test humanity's defences. You know, just a small probe here, a little invasion there, nothing major." His sarcasm was so thick you could have spread it on toast, assuming you were a species that practiced the bizarre ritual of burning plant matter and smearing it with protein pastes. The Crayon thought, and I quote from their last official transmission, "What's the worst that could happen?" "Those, my fellow representatives," Zikra continued, "turned out to be the most regrettable last words since watch this cool trick I learned with the black hole generator." A heavy silence fell over the chamber. Even the stress molting had stopped. In the distance, someone dropped what sounded like a quantum spanner, and at least 3 delegates jumped so high they triggered the artificial gravity compensators. "So," Zikra concluded, his scales settling into a grim shade of blue-grey, "shall I tell you exactly why we're now implementing Protocol 47B, also known as Don't Even Think About It, regarding any future military actions against Earth, and why the mere mention of humanity now causes half the Galactic Defense Force to call in sick?" The chamber stayed silent, all eyes and various other sensory organs fixed on the ambassador. A single drop of anxiety sweat from a Mercurian delegate sizzled as it hit the floor. "Very well," Zix said, his translator somehow managing to convey both dread and dark amusement. "Let me tell you about the day we learned that humans don't just think outside the box. They tear the box apart, reinvent it as something terrifying, and then ask if you'd like to see what else they can do with basic geometry." The crayon, Zikra continued, his scales shifting to a reminiscent orange, decided to attack 3 human colony worlds in the Orion Spur. Now, in their defense, and this is the last time anyone will ever defend a Kraken decision, they thought they were being clever. No direct assault on Earth, just a few strategic acquisitions of what they assumed were poorly defended outposts. He flicked a tendril, and the holographic display showed the 3 colonies: New Providence, Arcturus Prime, and Horizon's Edge. The crayon brought their standard invasion fleet, 12 dreadnoughts, 40 cruisers, and about 200 smaller craft, the kind of force that usually has developing civilizations signing surrender documents before breakfast. The Flaxian diplomat, who had partially reformed, raised a pseudopod. But surely they conducted proper intelligence gathering. Cray's laugh sounded like grinding gears. Oh, they did. They found out humans had no energy shields, no quantum weaponry, no psychic defenses. Their ships were practically antiques by our standards. The crayon thought it would be like taking nutrient paste from a Laurel. The hologram shifted to show the first moments of the invasion. They attacked all 3 colonies simultaneously, expecting a quick victory. Instead, do you know what they found? He paused for dramatic effect. The humans were waiting for them. Not just waiting, they were excited. The chamber erupted in confused chittering. The concept of being excited about combat was alien to most species present. The first sign that something was wrong came when the Kraken flagship, the ultimate victory, and let me just say, naming your ship that is just asking for ironic consequences, received a transmission from the human defenders. It was just 3 words. Finally, a challenge. Zixthak manipulated the controls, and battle footage began playing. Watch this. See how the human ships seemed to be moving randomly? That's because they were. Their battle formations made absolutely no tactical sense by any known military doctrine. The crayon actually wasted precious minutes running analytics, trying to find the pattern. There wasn't one. The humans were improvising, making it up as they went along. The footage showed human vessels performing maneuvers that made several navigational experts in the audience visibly nauseous. They were using their ship structural limitations as weapons. See that? That human captain deliberately let his ship get hit so the debris would create a navigation hazard. They were using damaged ships as improvised missiles. One human vessel lost its main weapons and proceeded to ram a Kraken cruiser while broadcasting something called Ride of the Valkyries. The hologram zoomed in on a particularly chaotic battle segment. Here's where it gets really interesting. The crayon deployed their standard neural disruptor weapons designed to incapacitate organic crew through fear responses. The humans? They started laughing, actually laughing. Apparently, they found the artificial fear hilarious and kind of tickly. As Zaran representative fainted, their crystalline form tinkling as it hit the floor, nobody moved to help. They were all too transfixed by the footage, but the real shock came when the humans started using their own technologies in ways nobody had considered. Those primitive projectile weapons we dismissed? Turns out, when you accelerate a chunk of metal to near relativistic speeds, energy shields have a really bad day. They outdated nuclear fusion tech. They turned their engines into weaponized nuclear pulse units. One human captain, and I still can't believe this is real, executed a combat maneuver by detonating a nuclear device against their own hull plating to change direction. The footage showed the aftermath of the battles all 3 colonies had held. The Kraken invasion fleet was in ruins, and the survivors were retreating in what could generously be called a state of panic. The humans suffered casualties, of course, lost ships, lost lives. But here's the truly terrifying part. They seemed to get more effective as they took losses. Every destroyed human ship just made the survivors more determined, more creative, and significantly more annoyed. Zikra's scales had settled into a deep purple of profound disturbance. The Kraken commander sent one final message before retreating. It read, and I quote, "They're not fighting a war, they're treating it like a game they're enjoying." That commander later resigned and became a spiritual advisor on a remote moon, specializing in meditation techniques for dealing with trauma. But this, he added, his voice dropping ominously, was just the beginning. The humans hadn't even started getting serious yet. And let me tell you, when humans get serious about warfare, they don't just break the rules. They rewrite them, set them on fire, and use the ashes to draw up plans for something even worse. Now, Zith continued, his scales rippling with a mix of awe and residual terror. You might be wondering what happened after the humans successfully defended their colonies. Surely they would seek diplomatic solutions, perhaps file a strongly worded complaint with the Council? He paused, letting out what could only be described as a mirthless chuckle. Oh, how I wish that had been the case. The holographic display shifted to show Earth's primary military command center. The humans had something they called Project Prometheus. When we first intercepted communications about it, our analysts thought it was some new superweapon. Shows what we know about human mythology. Prometheus wasn't just about fire, it was about giving power to those who weren't supposed to have it. You see, while we were all congratulating ourselves on our advanced technology, humanity had been studying every single piece of alien tech they could get their hands on, every crashed scout ship, every damaged probe, every scrap of debris. They weren't just studying it, they were improving it, and not in ways that made any sense to us. The display showed a series of human modifications to standard alien technology. Several council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "Look at this beauty," Zix gestured to what appeared to be a horrifying hybrid of human and Kraken technology. They took a standard Kraken shield generator, which everyone knows needs a massive power source, and hooked it up to something they called a potato battery. A potato, a literal root vegetable. It shouldn't work. It doesn't make sense for it to work, but somehow they made it work, better than the original. A Mirian delegate raised their servo arm. But surely they're biological limitations. Limitations? Zix interrupted, his scales flashing warning colours. Let me tell you about human limitations. When we destroyed one of their communication relays, they rigged up a replacement using old radio technology and a repurposed microwave cooking device. When their power cells ran low, they jerry-rigged energy systems using scavenged parts and something called coffee. They turned their environmental suits into improvised explosive devices, while still wearing them. The hologram showed a particularly chaotic battle scene. This was the moment we realized we'd made a terrible mistake. A human ship had lost all power. By all standard protocols, they should have surrendered. Instead, the crew suited up, pushed their ship into position manually using handheld propulsion units, and used the unpowered vessel as a gravity assist point for their fighters. They called it the slingshot maneuver and treated it like it was some kind of entertaining sport. But Project Prometheus wasn't just about technology. The humans had been preparing for something like this for centuries through what they called science fiction. They had apparently been imagining ways to fight aliens for generations. Every possible scenario, every potential strategy had been explored in their entertainment media. When we arrived, they didn't see alien invaders. They saw confirmation of every story they'd ever told themselves. The display shifted to show human military adaptation statistics. Their learning curve wasn't a curve at all. It was practically vertical. Every engagement taught them something new, and they shared these lessons with disturbing enthusiasm. They treated combat like a collective research project. Do you know they actually had something called after-action parties, where they celebrated particularly creative solutions to battlefield problems? Zura manipulated the controls to show a series of human innovations. They weaponized their own bacterial flora, creating biological defense systems that would make the target violently ill, but only if they weren't human. They developed quantum-entangled memes. Yes, memes, those information packets they use for humour, that could bypass our cybersecurity by being, and I quote, too stupid to be dangerous. They turned their primitive nuclear fusion technology into what they called spicy improvised propulsion systems. But the most terrifying aspect? His scales shifted to a deep ultraviolet of existential dread. They were having fun. Every new challenge we presented was met with enthusiasm. When we jammed their quantum communications, they started using modulated gravity waves to transmit messages in something called Morse code. When we deployed autonomous combat drones, they responded with reprogrammed cleaning robots armed with improvised weapons. One human commander actually sent a thank you note to a Kraken battle group for, as they put it, keeping things interesting. The chamber had grown so quiet you could hear the subtle humming of the quantum stabilizers in the walls. Several species known for their stoic nature were showing clear signs of distress. And then, Zikra said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, they started sharing their innovations with their civilian population. Do you know what happens when you give billions of humans access to experimental technology and tell them to go nuts? I do, Zix replied. I wish I didn't, but I do. The hologram showed scenes of human civilian ships joining military operations, each modified in ways that defied conventional engineering principles. They called it crowdsourcing the war effort. Civilian mining ships were converted into capital ship hunters. Transport vessels became stealth infiltration craft. Someone turned an orbital garbage scow into what they called a space shotgun. But perhaps the most chilling aspect was their response to casualties. In most species, losses lead to demoralization. Humans? They named ships after their fallen comrades and fought harder. Every defeat made them more determined. They created something called spite drives, engines that ran on pure stubbornness and redirected grief into propulsion energy. Zixthrak's scales settled into a sombre blue, and this, esteemed colleagues, was still just the beginning. Because the humans weren't just adapting, they were evolving their tactics faster than our predictive algorithms could process. They didn't just think outside the box, they made us question the very nature of boxes. Zix adjusted his positional stabilizers, his scales now pulsing with a rhythm that conveyed both dread and admiration. The human counterattack began with what they called Operation Boomerang, because, as they said, what goes around comes around. Though I suspect they chose that name just to confuse our tactical AI systems with references to primitive throwing weapons. The holographic display expanded to show the full galactic arm. The Crayon Empire expected a direct assault on their core worlds. It would have been logical, predictable, and exactly what any sensible species would do. The humans, being humans, decided that making sense was entirely optional. Instead, they split their fleet into what they called battle groups, each with a completely different tactical doctrine. Battle Group Alpha approached like a conventional military force, straight lines, proper formation, by-the-book maneuvers. Battle Group Beta appeared to be operating on combat protocols written by someone having a fever dream. And Battle Group Gamma? Well, he gestured at the hologram, which showed ships moving in patterns that made several navigation experts cover their sensory organs. The Crayon deployed their defensive fleets based on standard strategic protocols. The humans responded by executing something they called the Terror Protocol. When we first intercepted communications about it, we thought it was some superweapon. Turns out, it was worse. Much worse. The display showed human ships beginning synchronized maneuvers. The Terror Protocol wasn't a weapon. It was a philosophical approach to warfare. Its core principle was, and I quote, "If it's stupid, but it works, it isn't stupid." The humans had basically weaponized their own unpredictability. Watch this engagement, Zra highlighted a battle sector. Battle Group Alpha engages the Crayon fleet in a textbook confrontation. Everything's proceeding according to standard combat doctrine. Then, right here. The hologram zoomed in. Battle Group Beta drops out of hyperspace inside the debris field of a destroyed moon. Inside it, they use the radiation and gravitational distortions as stealth coverage. Our sensors registered it as a navigational error right up until they opened fire. A quantum observer raised their probability matrix. Surely such reckless tactics resulted in massive casualties. Oh, absolutely, Zuth confirmed. But here's the thing about humans and casualties. They factor them into their strategies. They had backup plans for their backup plans. When Battle Group Beta lost ships, the crews would eject in what they called surprise party packages. Escape pods, modified with stealth technology and makeshift weapons. The display shifted to another sector. And while everyone was focused on these battles, Battle Group Gamma was doing this. The hologram showed human ships performing maneuvers that seemed to violate several laws of physics. They turned their engines into weapons, their weapons into shields, and their shields into sensors. One captain rerouted their entire ship's power through the coffee maker creating an electromagnetic pulse that disabled 3 Kraken dreadnoughts. But the true terror of the Terror Protocol became apparent when other species started witnessing these battles. The VX Cathine Confederacy, watching from their neutral territory, immediately signed a non-aggression pact with humanity. The Wythe Collector, known for their strategic brilliance, actually requested human military advisors, though they quickly regretted it when the humans suggested mounting FTL drives on asteroids to create what they called really fast rocks. Zikra's scale shifted to a particularly unsettled shade of mauve. The humans had turned warfare into a form of creative expression. They held competitions for the most innovative tactical solutions. Their after-action reports read like entertainment reviews. One commander rated a battle as 3 stars, would explode again. They started naming their military operations with puns. Do you know how terrifying it is to intercept a transmission about something called Operation Pizza Delivery, only to discover it's a complex tactical maneuver involving slice-shaped fleet formations and something they called extra toppings, which turned out to be antimatter mines? The hologram displayed a particularly chaotic battle scene. This was the breaking point for many Kraken commanders. The humans launched what appeared to be a frontal assault on a heavily fortified position. Standard doctrine would call for a strategic retreat. Instead, they broadcast an ancient human battle cry, Leroy Jenkins, and proceeded to do whatever this is. The display showed maneuvers that made several tactical experts in the audience need to excuse themselves. They turned their damaged ships into weapons, their debris into hazards, and their retreat paths into ambush zones. They used their own destroyed vessels as gravitational anchor points for maneuvers that our physics divisions still can't explain. One human fleet commander, when informed that their tactics violated the laws of thermodynamics, reportedly responded with, "Laws are more like guidelines anyway." Zix manipulated the controls one final time, showing the full scope of the human counteroffensive. By this point, the Kraken Empire had lost not just ships and territory, but their fundamental understanding of how warfare worked. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were rewriting the rules of engagement with each encounter. They turned defeat into opportunity, chaos into strategy, and desperation into inspiration. Other species watching these events unfold came to a unanimous conclusion. Never, ever make humanity feel the need to get creative with their military response. The Andromeda Association actually added a new clause to their diplomatic protocols. In the event of human involvement, assume all traditional tactical doctrines are obsolete and possibly hilarious. His scales settled into a pattern that somehow conveyed both amusement and horror. And remember, this was just the military aspect of their response. We haven't even gotten to what their civilian scientists were cooking up in their recreational research time, or as they called it, hold my beer moments. Zara's scales rippled with what could only be described as sympathetic embarrassment. The Kraken Empire, facing unprecedented losses and tactics that defied their military doctrine, decided to deploy what they considered their ultimate weapon, the Mind Shatter Array, a device capable of broadcasting fear and confusion directly into enemy consciousness, the kind of weapon that had brought entire civilizations to their knees. He paused, his chromatophores flickering with barely suppressed amusement. The humans responded by broadcasting something called dad jokes on the same frequency. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. A quantum intelligence representative actually had to reboot. You see, Z6R continued, when faced with psychic warfare, the humans discovered that their most groan-inducing attempts at humour created what they called psychic static. The Mind Shatter Array couldn't penetrate their defences because their minds were too busy processing puns like, "Why don't aliens eat clowns?" because they taste funny. The holographic display showed the massive Kraken psychic weapon array powering up, only to be met with what appeared to be an endless stream of human transmissions. The Kraken psychic operators actually requested reassignment. One of them left a note saying, and I quote, "If I have to endure one more knock-knock joke, I'm joining a monastery." But the humans didn't stop there. Oh no, they decided to launch their own psychological warfare campaign. They called it Operation Comedy Central. Instead of trying to intimidate the enemy, they began to mock them. The display showed intercepted human broadcasts. They created what they called memes about the Kraken military leadership. They turned battle footage into something called fail compilations. They wrote catchy songs about Kraken tactical blunders and broadcast them on all frequencies. The Kraken High Command had to deal with the fact that their troops were humming human victory shanties. The breaking point came when the humans started sending gift baskets to defeated Kraken commanders. Actual gift baskets with notes saying things like, "Better luck next time," and "Thanks for the practice." One human admiral sent a Kraken fleet commander a self-help book titled Losing Battles for Dummies, with helpful passages highlighted. Zix's scales shifted to a particularly amused shade of cayenne. The Kraken Empire had faced defeat before, but never humiliation. Their allies began to distance themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with the species that had become the galaxy's biggest military meme. The Pixar Confederation actually broke their 1,000-year alliance after a human hacked their central communication hub to play something called Never Gonna Give You Up on repeat. The hologram showed various alien fleets hastily retreating from Kraken space. The humans had discovered something far more devastating than any weapon. They'd found out that the galaxy's military forces had no defense against embarrassment. They started naming their ships things like Your Mum's Revenge and I Can't Believe It's Not Butter. They painted smiley faces on their dreadnoughts. One human commander, when confronted with a Kraken ultimatum, responded by sending a cat video. Just that. No message, no threats. Just a small earth feline knocking objects off a table. The Kraken strategic AI spent 3 weeks trying to decode the hidden meaning before suffering what we can only describe as a synthetic nervous breakdown. The display shifted to show the collapse of the Kraken military structure. Their command structure couldn't handle it. How do you maintain military discipline when your enemy treats galactic warfare like an elaborate prank. The humans weren't just winning battles, they were making the entire concept of serious space combat seem ridiculous. The final straw came when human civilian ships joined in. Merchant vessels began broadcasting cooking shows during combat. Mining ships would dodge plasma torpedoes while debating soap opera plots. A human tourist yacht, wandered into a battle zone and started giving tactical advice to both sides like it was commentating on a sports event. Zixthrak manipulated the controls to show the extent of the psychological impact. The Kraken Empire, once feared throughout the galaxy, became known as those guys who got memed into submission. Their recruitment numbers dropped to 0. Their warmies had to shut down because every tactical lecture devolved into students sharing human battle memes. Other species watched in horror as the humans systematically dismantled, not just the Kraken military, but their entire reputation. The ZXV Collective, known for their militant expansion, actually renamed their warships to sound less threatening. The Quantum Hegemony revised their entire military doctrine to include a new primary directive. If humans start laughing, retreat immediately. His scales settled into a pattern that somehow conveyed both amusement and existential dread. The humans had discovered that the most effective weapon against a militaristic empire wasn't superior firepower or advanced technology. It was the ability to make them look absolutely ridiculous. They turned intergalactic warfare into a comedy show where the Kraken were the unwitting stars. And perhaps the most terrifying part? The humans genuinely enjoyed it. They weren't just winning, they were having the time of their lives. Their battle reports read like entertainment reviews. They gave style points for particularly spectacular explosions. They started a galactic trend of rating military encounters on something called Yelp. Zix's final gesture showed the remnants of the once mighty Kraken fleet retreating to their home system. In the end, the Kraken Empire wasn't defeated by force of arms alone. They were memed out of the galactic community. Their final transmission before surrendering was just 4 words: "Please make them stop." Zix's scales shifted to a more formal shade of blue as he addressed the next phase. The surrender ceremony was unique, to say the least. The humans insisted on holding it on their space station, Party Central. Yes, that was its actual diplomatic designation. They served something called pizza and root beer while discussing terms. The holographic display showed the historic meeting. The Kraken representatives expected harsh reparations, territory seizures, maybe even species-wide imprisonment. Instead, the humans presented them with what they called the Chill Agreement. Its first article actually stated everyone needs to calm down and stop being jerks in space. The terms were surprisingly lenient, but with some interesting stipulations. First, all Kraken military vessels had to be repainted in what humans called friendly colours, their choice, pink with yellow smiley faces. Second, the Kraken Empire had to rename itself to the Kraken Cooperative of Really Nice People who learned their lesson. Several council members shifted uncomfortably as the display showed the new Kraken ship designs. But the truly revolutionary changes came in the form of new galactic laws the humans proposed, and I still can't believe we agreed to this, the Don't Be a Space Jerk Act. It included provisions like mandatory humour training for diplomatic staff and required all species to develop at least 3 good jokes before making first contact. They established the Intergalactic Whoopsie Prevention Protocol. Yes, that's its official name in all 742 council languages. Any species considering military action against another must first watch a compilation video of what happened to the Kraken Empire, followed by a mandatory cooling-off period involving what humans call chill vibes and lo-fi beats to relax. The display shifted to show the new galactic peacekeeping structure. The humans also introduced the concept of space timeout corners, designated regions where aggressive species must go to think about what they did. They're actually quite nice, with meditation gardens and complimentary stress balls. Perhaps most significantly, they established the Keeper of the Vibe position on the Galactic Council. This representative's sole job is to, and I quote, make sure nobody's getting too full of themselves out there in the cosmic playground. Zra's scales rippled with amused respect. The permanent changes to interstellar relations were profound. Species that once communicated purely through formal diplomatic channels now send memes. The annual Galactic Military Parade was replaced with something called a space block party. The humans even set up an exchange program they called the Cosmic Buddy System. Now, potentially aggressive species are paired with what they term chill species to learn the art of not taking themselves too seriously. The Vians, once known as planet conquerors, are currently learning interpretive dance from sentient gas clouds. His scales settled into a thoughtful pattern. But perhaps the most lasting impact was the introduction of what humans call the Vibe Check Protocol. Before any species can join the Galactic Council, they must prove they can take a joke about themselves. The humans argue that any civilization advanced enough for interstellar travel should be mature enough to laugh at their own mistakes. And so, Zix concluded this portion. We entered a new era of galactic peace, not through fear or might, but through the deeply unsettling realization that somewhere out there a species exists that will turn your military defeat into an intergalactic comedy special, complete with merchandising and a viral dance challenge. Zix's scales settled into a final serious shade of deep purple as he addressed the council one last time. And so, esteemed colleagues, now you understand why we're all here today, why we dropped everything to have this emergency session. The hologram flickered off, leaving the chamber in a contemplative semi-darkness. Because yesterday, someone from the Nexu Dominion thought it would be amusing to fire a warning shot across the bow of a human medical transporter. Just one shot, for fun. A collective shudder ran through the chamber. The human captain's response was to turn their ship around, park it right in front of the Nexu vessel, and broadcast an ancient human video called "You Can't Touch This," while performing what they called the Running Man dance on their observation deck. His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the vast chamber. That, my friends, was their warning shot. The humans are feeling playful again. And if there's one thing worse than humans at war, it's humans who think war might be entertaining. So let this be noted in all official records. We're not avoiding war with humanity because we're afraid of losing. We're avoiding it because we're afraid of becoming the galaxy's next viral sensation. The choice is yours. You can either be a respected member of the galactic community, or you can be the species that gets turned into what humans call a reaction GIF. Meeting adjourned, and may whatever cosmic forces you believe in help you if you ever make the humans bored enough to want to play war games again. And that's it for today's tale, folks. If you enjoyed this wild ride into the chaotic brilliance of humanity's intergalactic escapades, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more sci-fi enthusiasts like you. Don't forget to subscribe to join our ever-expanding fleet of spacefaring story lovers. I've got plenty more hilarious, action-packed and thought-provoking HFY stories coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Got thoughts on this one? Drop a comment below. Let me know your favourite part or share your own ideas about how humanity could win the universe with creativity and chaos. I'd love to hear from you. And hey, if you know someone who'd get a kick out of this, share it with them. Let's spread the love for science fiction and the endless possibilities of human imagination. Thanks for watching, and as always, keep dreaming big and thinking outside the galaxy. See you in the next one. Blast off sparkles.